After a full experience of mystical union, there's an afterglow of a lower intensity of spirit ecstasy and exhilaration, lasting anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. Afterglow periods can also follow mystical experiences of lesser fullness and intensity. If this was the first such experience, now the real work of one's soul begins, the work of uniting one's relative mind with spirit, and of overcoming the anti-spiritual habits or tendencies of body and mind, and of anti-spiritual social conditioning. Your soul now has a new and powerful magnetic point of attraction, upward to spirit rather than down to body and the world. Kundalini, or the up to now dormant spiritual energy within the body, may likely be suddenly ignited. You may become aware of new spiritual sounds and lights, of subtle energies moving in the body, and you may also become more intuitive or psychic. You may become more sensitized to beauty and begin to see more beauty in ordinary things. You can see these things as beautiful because you now know that spirit is present in them, and you can see the beauty of spirit in them. You become more and more able to see the goodness as well as the beauty of their unitary source in more and more things. As the intensity of the original experience and its afterglow wears off, for many people a dark night of the soul may begin. What this means is that the soul is now conscious of and knows that there's a great spirit ideal to strive for, but may have no idea about how to go about this striving. The newly awakened soul is thrown back into the troubles and turmoils of body and the world, and yet doesn't know ways to get out. This dark night time can last many years or decades, and can even extend into future incarnations. The newly awakened person may begin to look for ways to go about this striving for spirit in his or her native or indigenous religions. In the West, many may first look for this in Christianity. In the East, they would probably look for it in mystical Hinduism or Buddhism. This dark night of the soul time is filled with religious hazards, because the seeker might be drawn into believing in religious ideologies or leaders, which are themselves lacking in spiritual light or wisdom. Established religions and their leaders frequently forget about the light of spirit that originally inspired them, and to lose sight of spirit as dogmas, rituals, and power trips take over. Another great hazard of this dark night time is that not finding quick success at finding ways to reconnect with spirit, one may give up and be drawn back into the anti-spiritual habits one had prior to awakening. This is called backsliding. There's a lot of social pressures that encourage backsliding, such as needs to struggle to make a material living in a world that not only encourages and rewards materialism, but may also encourage exploitation, and the pressures of living in a social world in which most people may find their main meanings of life in mundane things, and in which higher and more subtle forms of knowledge may be ridiculed or even ostracized. These are forms of anti-spiritual conditioning that eventually need to be overcome. The physical body itself can also present great challenges because of its sensual drives that can pull energy down. These tend to be strongest during youth. So as Plato observes in the Republic, finding spiritual freedom can become easier as the body ages. Knowledge of this fact is built into Hinduism, as shown in the traditions of normally reserving the contemplative and renunciative stages of life for people who are older than 48. These hazards should be viewed as challenges for spirit. Spirit becomes stronger by overcoming them. These hazards are signified by the armies of Mara that the Buddha had to conquer before reaching enlightenment. The greater the challenges, the greater will be the eventual victory and triumph of the spirit that can overcome them. Because of the hazards and the negative conditioning posed by the social world, growing in enlightenment frequently requires one to learn to think critically about social norms and conventions, to be able to question and resist them, and to go a different way. This is why true spirituality and nonconformism often go hand in hand. If one is fortunate enough to find authentic means of reconnecting with spirit and is determined enough to work and follow through with them, eventually one will learn how to harness the energy of spirit to overcome the challenges of the body, the social world, and anti-spiritual forms of conditioning, and to remain more and more conscious of spirit through all the activities of everyday life. Enlightenment occurs along a continuum. It begins at the first event of spirit awakening and concludes with a full immersion of the soul in spirit realization at all times. Very few physically incarnate souls, especially here on this dense planet now, have reached the end stage of the spirit journey. With very few exceptions, all of us, even the masters, are still learning and are still here to learn and progress.